Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Tavis Leaf Clever, and today we've got pretty much the viewer's choice video for everybody that suggested different artists to check out and analyze. This video is for you. So I've got 29 suggested artists here, and I've broken down just a few techniques within each one of them. And then the cinematography that was suggested, that's going to be in a different video. So let's start with Poynter. My first impression, I'm just going to give you guys my first impression and just maybe point out some things that work, some things that don't work, just so you guys can get a lot of value out of this and gain as much knowledge about design and composition techniques as possible. So let's get into it. But my first impression on this was it's very elaborate, very cool. I love Poynter's work, but I also thought it was very busy and there was a lot going on. So we'll cover this, and I was kind of just, if you squint your eyes, you can see, try and find the greatest area of contrast and where the artist wants you to look first. And we've got a lot in the windows, a lot in this crowd, a lot in the lines down here. You know, a lot of contrast going around. That's what's kind of making the scene look a little bit busy. So, but definitely this guy's standing out to me, and then this woman. So one thing I thought would benefit from this is the contrast. If he adjusted the contrast a little bit, subdued the background more, and then created more contrast within these two characters. So refining the contrast where he's got it would simplify this complex scene. And this, it looks pretty awful when you do it in Photoshop, but I mean, as he was painting it, he could have subdued this crowd behind here, and especially these high contrast areas in the background, and then a lot of these like negative space areas between the statues create a lot of contrast and just a lot of distractions away from the main subject. So like these are more contrasty than actually the main subjects here. Another thing he's working with that is nice is the counterpart. So if you take the vertical center line, you'll see that he's balancing it nice with this woman, this man, and then everything else is kind of dispersed from that center line. One thing I would have liked to see is these peacocks down here. I would have liked to see him compose these a little bit better, because right as it is, this peacock's head is overlapping the other peacock, and you can't really identify it too well. And then this peacock's head is behind the table, can't identify that too well. So it's only when you're actually maybe in front of this painting, or if you're looking up closer, you can kind of tell what's going on. But at first glance, you don't really see the cool little peacocks down here. So that's something to be aware of. So let's go on to the next one. This is Velazquez, and I'll probably just skip their names because it's better than pronouncing them differently, and I'll put the title of their name over the painting or the photo, whichever it is. But this one is a famous painting that was suggested, and I wanted to point out that they have an exit in the back here. This is usually used by masters to create depth. Okay, it could be high contrast within a tree, or a window, or in this case it's a door, but they're creating high contrast in the background so the eyes can travel from the foreground and then to the background, just creating a little bit more depth there. So that's the exit. One thing I didn't really think was great was the overlap of this head. So he's got her head kind of overlapping, it's kissing these edges here, and it's just not as clear as it could be, and perhaps he made that overlap the background just to show that she's in the foreground, but I think her size pretty much tells us that she's in the foreground, he's in the background. Also, we can see how strong this shape is in the background. It's an aspective view compared to the ones in the foreground. Okay, so he's got this high contrast in the background as well as aspective view and nice figure ground relationship, but what that does is it's pulling a lot of attention away from the main subjects here in the foreground. So this is gaining a lot of attention right here. And so we need to read the contrast as the artist creates it, and perhaps he wants this to be a major part of the story. I don't know really what's going on in the scene, but just by reading the composition, he wants this to be a main part of the scene for some reason. Or it's a compositional error, but either way, we need to pay attention where the contrast is being applied within our composition. So I subdued it here, and you can see how more attention comes to the foreground. He's still part of the story, but he's not as important as he was. So right here, he's kind of, you can see the difference. So that's the importance of the greatest area of contrast. Kim Jung kind of suffers in a similar way. A lot of people like his work because he can draw from imagination and just create these pretty crazy, interesting scenes here. My first impression was it was really busy just because we can't really easily identify what's going on in the scene, who the main subjects are, who he wants us to look at first. Obviously, contrast draws our eyes to this guy. He's got the black area right on that guy, so the artist is suggesting that this is the main subject, but who knows? Maybe it could be this guy. He's got better figure-ground relationship. You can see him clearly separated by the head there. It's a nice figure-ground relationship. He's got aspective views on the birds. He's got the birds in different positions, which is nice. This one's turning one way, the other is turning another way. They're all turning different ways. But my big suggestion for something this complex and busy would be to reduce the contrast in the background objects. That would emphasize the foreground elements and maybe emphasize this guy a little bit more. So I did that. I adjusted this just to show you kind of what it might look like if he did this a little bit better. Photoshop's going to look a lot worse than what you could do in real life, but this is just suggesting what he could do to pop these main characters out and then have everything be secondary to these two main characters, because that way this bottle sticks out. A lot more interesting things there. Hierarchy of contrast. And then this area, see, like, you can't hardly tell what's going on with these two guys. This foot right here is kissing the edge of the whatever that is, but you can see how this long pole or rope, it's intersecting this guy's head, it's kissing this leg, it's intersecting all these little different objects. A lot of stuff's going on, so it's just, you want visual clarity in your art and you want to communicate it clearly so the person viewing your art doesn't get confused about what kind of story you're trying to create, and you want them to be able to see it simply even if it's a complex scene. So right here he kind of creates more contrast in this area here, which is a lot better than what he did in the previous one. But you can see the contrast he's creating here, a little bit more here, and then our eyes are drawn over here in this direction too. So that's a little bit better, but he's got a lot of stuff going on, so you need to use design techniques and control the value to communicate it clearly. Eugene Smith, this one, a lot of these had contrast types of issues. This one, the GAC, we can see that whoever edited this in the darkroom, they increased the contrast in the background. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it looks like it was edited in the darkroom because these faces are popping off the background, which is good for helping to describe the three characters here and creating nice figure-ground relationship. But a lot of the times, usually in a dark image like this, the light areas will come forward. So right here we have the light areas behind the main subjects. So it kind of creates a little bit of pulsating feeling, a little bit of visual tension. And you can see how they maybe perhaps darkened the edges of the face here to give them more contrast. But I did adjust this to have more contrast on the actual faces, have those the lightest parts instead of the background, subdued the background, and then that pops these three figures forward a little bit, kind of looks a little bit more natural. But, you know, you can only do so much with an image. Very good image though. This one is Ted Gore. Really cool image, really beautiful image. I believe it could be probably a composite. A lot of stuff's in focus, so he could have focus stacked images, or he could have composited these photos. But this looks like it was edited in this nice spiraling cloud. You can see the spiral in the clouds. So it looks like that was edited in. It's got 3 points of interest. This one's really interesting. This area of flowers is really interesting, and it's more interesting than the mountains or the rock and the reflection. But if we look at it, he's got most of the contrast up here and a lot of contrast here. So our eyes are probably drawn to either one of these, and then this is maybe secondary. But to me, this is actually the more interesting part. It's got all those colors, it's got different shapes, it's got a lot of different textures, patterns, a lot of stuff going on. So for me, I believe the contrast is in the wrong spot because he's got the main interest right here. And then I did look closer at this, and you could see how some of the trees look a little bit maybe photoshopped. Could be the fog, but it did look a little bit photoshopped there in the background. And then the rock, usually when light, it looks like the light's coming from the left side here. It's hitting this mountain on the left side, We got shadow on the right, hitting this rock on the left, but we have shadow right here, and the shadow's over here too, which is natural, but that shadow on the left side leads me to believe something was composited or something's going on there. Anyway, cool image, did a great job. I'm just really nitpicking all these so you guys can learn as much as you can.